Alrighty. Alright, good evening. We are going to get straight into what we are talking about tonight, and not wait. I'm trying to maneuver some stuff, but in the meantime, yeah, I trust that you would have had a good weekend, and that your week is off to a great start. And so, I was this close to not doing an affirmation tonight, but I think it's necessary for me to talk tonight. And what our conversation this evening has to do with, I've dubbed it, well, from the hashtag I think you would see that it says think. And I know it's often, sometimes we are caught up in the moment, we're caught up in the moment of a situation, or whatever it is that happens or that's happening to us or around us, that we are often quick to give an opinion of something. We're quick to give our views of whatever the situation is, whether we have all the information or not. We are quick to have our take on it. I heard a long time ago that there was an argument, and of course everybody will have their opinions about that argument. And you know, it's easier and it's popular to hear people say that you are entitled to your own opinion. And somebody said, on the contrary, you're not necessarily entitled to your opinion. An opinion that's not fueled with all of the information. What you are entitled to is an informed opinion. And so, in the absence of having all of the information, we could possibly just be contributing to the problem as against coming up with a solution. And so when our opinions or our views that we voice are not informed opinions, when they're not ideas that we come up with after we would have received all the information that's necessary, then really how much weight does it have? And so tonight, our affirmation for this week, well, it will be for however long, and that we continue to, is that we are to think. And I'll break it down for us to understand a little bit more of what my thoughts are behind the idea that we should be active thinkers. We know we're to be active listeners, but we must also think things through. And so we're often guilty of speaking and acting based on our emotions, or what is the current high, what's the current affairs. And so we have opinions about things that we don't necessarily have all the information from, and so we respond in the moment without considering several things. Really, do we ever have all of the information? Have we been, and these are questions we ask ourselves before we should be careful to open our mouths to voice our opinion on something. Do we have all the information? Have we been exposed to all the possibilities or influences surrounding the outcome of the situation? And do we have, or do I have, a natural bias in each particular situation? Because, and it happens when you are in a multicultural environment a lot, where people are easy to come to the defense of a stereotype that may be known for their island or their country or whatever it is, or their people or their family. And sometimes we are so quick to jump to the defense of what we are familiar with that we don't take into consideration that what we might be hearing what the situation is may in fact be the truth. And so before we allow ourselves to articulate what comes through our head, we must give ourselves time to think. And in so doing, we're better able to safeguard ourselves from having to, first forming that opinion that was incorrect, or secondly voicing something that really doesn't build or benefit anybody in the long run. And so it's an error to critique anyone or anything without credentials to do so. I'm gonna say that one more time. If we find ourselves critiquing or critiquing anything or anyone, and we don't have the credentials to do so, then we're living and walking in error. It's like me walking into a wine testing and have absolutely no knowledge of wine. Then on what basis am I judging the wine that I'm tasting or I'm testing? It's like me going into a kitchen to judge people's cooking, and I have no idea of, I mean, I could judge the taste and that's okay, but the process of getting there I've got to be careful of. And so when we find ourselves in a situation where we find ourselves judging or forming ideas of things, or in situations that we are not qualified to, or we don't have the credentials to do, then we really are walking in some degree of error. And so while we may believe that we have the right to the opinion, what I want us to begin to think and channel ourselves to is before we form that opinion, before we voice that opinion, that we give ourselves the opportunity to think it through. Consider whether or not you've got all the information that you need to form that opinion. Is it an informed opinion, or is it just an idea you're expressing? And so if not, then we expose ourselves to having to probably apologize. And if we're strong enough to acknowledge when we're in such an error, then we are able to understand that we are in that error, and that we can apologize for those opinions that we have voiced, those negative conversations that we've had about things and people that we didn't have the credentials, we didn't hold the credentials to form that opinion or to judge a situation. And so before we even get to that, what I'm imploring us, or what I'm encouraging us to do in our affirmations this week, is to think it through. And when I say think, we are to ask ourselves questions when we hear whatever it is that we hear, even if we see, because sometimes we may walk into a situation, it's like a fight. You walk into a place where they're fighting, and all we know is that there's a fight, but what brought you to this place? What were the causes that brought you to this place? And so we must think. Think for T, meaning we ask ourselves, is it the truth? Is what I'm hearing the truth? And sometimes things aren't always as they appear. So even if we see it, we ask ourselves, is this really what's happening, or is my vision skewed? Am I just having a glance of it, or is it really the entire picture of it? And so we are to be conscious to ask ourselves the question, is it the truth? And so before we even form that opinion, we must be careful to do that. Is it the truth, or is it just gossip? And so when we do that, we are able to, when we open our mouths to speak, then what we speak is informed, what we speak is balanced, what we speak is able to bring solutions, as against just contributing to what the problem already is. And so we are to think before we speak. It is popular to hear, and we are often hearing that as a man thinketh, so is he. And what's inside comes out. What's the abundance from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so sometimes we hear ourselves say things, and then we wonder, where did that come from? Well, it could only come from what is already inside of us. And so when we allow ourselves, when we train ourselves to think first, then we're able to reprogram ourselves so that what is inside of us matches what comes out of us. And so I've been saying for the longest while that we are not truly powerful until what comes out of us matches what is inside of us. And so something we're often guilty of saying things but believe in something else, or believe in one thing but we open our mouths and then what we speak doesn't match what we believe on the inside. And so we must be careful to number one, think, not when we think, we must ask ourselves before we form those opinions, before we go talking about what we don't know or what we think we know, is it the truth, or is this just the gossip, is this just a popular thing? When we can ask ourselves and examine that, then we are putting ourselves in a better position to be able to have an opinion about the situation, to have an opinion about the circumstance. Even if it's somebody who's sick, am I just speaking because of what I have heard, or have I been informed so that what I speak comes from a place of information? And when that thing comes from a place of information, I'm not just being sympathetic. I can come from a position of empathy where I'm able to feel what you feel, because I have allowed myself the opportunity to be exposed to all of the information that affects you. And so we must ask ourselves, well, is this the truth, or is this just the gossip? The H in think, we must ask ourselves, when I speak, when I form my opinion, I'm about to voice it, is it going to be helpful to anybody? Is it helping me? Is it helping my position, first of all? And secondly, is it going to help anybody who is hearing it? The person that hears when I verbalize my thoughts, is it helping them in any way, or do they remain the same? Who's benefiting from what we are saying or doing? THI, I'm learning to spell as well. The I in think, is it inspirational? Am I just talking for the sake of being heard? Am I just speaking because I have a position that allows me to speak? Or in my speaking because I have allowed myself to understand that, well, this is the truth, or this is gossip, or whatever it is. Secondly, well, I have determined based on the information that I've been exposed to that when I speak is going to help somebody. And so when I come to that place of understanding those things, then we must be careful that before we speak, we choose words that, even in correcting, that we remain inspirational. Because I think people come into our areas, into a sphere, for different reasons, and you never know what somebody else is dealing with. And so we may know of somebody who's having a difficulty, somebody who is going through something, and is looking for somebody to look beyond what their negative experience has been, or look beyond what their difficulties are, to speak something. Even when we have the information may look negative, it may appear dark, that what we speak has the ability to positively influence that person, or to positively inspire them. And there's there are lots of situations of suicide. People are dealing with depression, people are dealing with so many things, anxiety, people are dealing with so many things in their lives. And so oftentimes people reach to that point because there was nobody along the line who thought to think about what they were saying to that individual first, trying to ascertain, well, is this the truth or is it not? Is what I'm saying helpful, or is it going to be harmful to that individual? And when I speak it to them, is it going to inspire them to seek help? Is it going to inspire them to continue fighting? Or is it just going to propel them into a dark place that they're already fighting to get through? And so we must be careful that the words that we speak, the words that we say to each other, whether it's our families or loved ones, the person on the job, some stranger, because you never know what somebody is coming to the table with, what their experiences are. And so we must be careful and be deliberate that in our conversations with people, the people that we interact with, whether it's a client, whether it's, and I know in the area in which I work, it's easy to look at the clients and have and form negative opinions about them, but sometimes they are looking for somebody to consider all that's wrong with them, consider all that's not working, and then speak something that inspires them to change the course or the trajectory or direction in which their life is going. So good night, good night, good night, good night. We must be think it through, and in thinking it through, we must ask ourselves, is it the truth? Is it helpful? Is what I'm saying, is it going to be helpful? The third thing we must ask ourselves is it going to be inspirational? Is it going to inspire somebody? Is it going to motivate someone else? Or me sharing my opinion just really is just to be shady or whatever it is that we do, or to just contribute to the gossip at the cooler. The next thing we must ask ourselves or be conscious of, is it necessary that I say what I think? Sometimes we are, in the moment we just say what comes to our head, and we're never conscious of how it's going to affect those who hear it, or how it's going to affect those around us. But in growth, in becoming more mature, we must ask ourselves, is it necessary for me to say what I am going to say, especially if it's not going to be beneficial or inspirational? We must consider the fact, is it necessary? Whether it's the truth or not, is it necessary that I voice my opinion in this situation, especially if the thing doesn't concern us? Because we often are guilty of picking up battles that don't belong to us, and we end up in situations that we could avoid because we got involved in things that we should not have. And so we must always ask ourselves, well, is it necessary that I say this? Is it necessary that I express this concern, especially if it's not going to be beneficial to the parties who are involved? And even sometimes when it is necessary, we must ask ourselves, is this the right timing that I say what I need to say? Because the right thing done at the wrong time, it could be just as detrimental or negative as the wrong thing done at the right time. So we must ask ourselves, is it necessary that I respond to you? Is it necessary that I give in to this moment, that I feel the emotions that I feel in this moment? Or do I just need to step back and give it some time before I come back to the table and say, well, this is how I felt, or this is whatever was happening. And so we must be conscious of that as well. And the final thing we must be conscious of, or be careful of, that when we speak, when we voice our opinions, when we give our views, is it kind? Is what I'm saying kind? What's my motive behind me doing what I am doing? Is it kind? I know personally sometimes I'm sharp with my mouth, and I'm not always careful that that I'm being kind in that regard. And so, like, I'm talking to myself as well. What's my motive? We must ask ourselves, well, what's my motive for doing what I'm doing? What's my motive for saying what I'm saying? And what are my intentions? Are my intentions really to help this situation or to help this person? Or is it just for me to weigh in and be a part of the current discussion? And so, to recap, before we speak, before we voice our opinions, we must be careful to think. Even in an argument, sometimes the anger that rushes to us causes us to respond, but in giving ourselves an opportunity to mature, we must be conscious of our surroundings and acknowledge when we need to step away from something before we respond. For me, I always prefer to say nothing, step away, and think it through, then to respond in the moment when I'm angry, and then have to come back to apologize. I want to apologize as less as possible. So I want to think it through before I give my views, before I give my opinions. And so, to recap, and then I'm done, we must consider these things in our opinions. First of all, we're not exactly entitled to an opinion. If we're given an opinion that's not an informed opinion, then it's gossip. If our opinions are not informed, it is just gossip. But when our opinions are informed, we ask ourselves, is it the truth? Do I have all of the information before I give my views, before I give my opinion, before I voice what I think based on what I heard or what I saw? Is this the truth? The second thing is, when I speak, is what I'm going to say helpful? Is it going to be beneficial to anybody? Or is it just going to be me weighing in on what the current situation is or what the current gossip is? The third thing we must ask ourselves before we speak, before we voice our concerns or our opinions, is it inspiring? Is it inspirational? Is what I am going to say inspire somebody to change in a positive way? Even if I'm bringing correction to that person, my choice of words must be in such a way that the worst person could feel as though there's still some amount of hope for them to change the trajectory of their lives, to change the direction in which they are going. The fourth thing we must examine, is it necessary that I speak? Even though I may have the position and the authority to say something, is it necessary for me to speak? And even when it becomes necessary, is this the right time for me to say what is on my mind, or what the opinion that I have formed has been? Because nobody wants to be corrected in front of a large audience. And so if you have the opportunity to bring correction to somebody, to encourage somebody in a forum that doesn't embarrass them, because even though our intentions might be right, if we don't do it in the correct way, then the thing that was designed to be helpful can become offensive. And we don't want to live in offense. We don't want to provoke people to that place, because it becomes the root of anger, it becomes the root of bitterness, it becomes the root of so many other things. And so even though our intentions may have been to help that person, if we're not careful to ascertain and to judge the situation, is this the right time and is this the right place for me to do this, then our good intentions could go wrong, and that person could be further hurt or damaged than we would have initially thought. And the final thing we must ask ourselves, is it kind? And kindness, what is kindness? Kindness truly is not something we give to somebody who deserves it. If they deserve it, then it's not kindness. Kindness really in its true sense is given to somebody who does not, or who we adjudge that does not deserve this act. And so the minute we begin to think that they deserve this, then it's almost natural. But kindness really takes into account something that person doesn't deserve. They don't deserve it, but I'm still going to go the extra mile to say, I'm going to treat you differently, even though how you treated me was less than what I deserved, or what were less than what I was worth. And so in our assessment and in our dealings with people, we must think. THINK, 5 letters, 5 meanings, 5 things we must be conscious of. Is it the truth? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? So the next time you hear something about somebody, the next time you are in a situation, whether it's at work, at play, wherever, whatever it is that you find yourselves in, let's be conscious to do that. Think. Is it the truth? Is it helping anybody? Is it inspiring anybody? And if we could answer yes to those questions, then we are in every position to voice that opinion. But if our opinions are not balanced with information, then it's just gossip. And so rather than we continue to contribute to the gossip of the day and the situation, whatever it is that happens in and around us, let's be careful to think. Have a good night and have a great week, everybody.